When your internet is down, it can impact a lot of things: work from home, homeschooling, meetings, streaming, and so on. It can be very frustrating to try to figure out what's going on. Most people are not IT gurus and just want it to work. Here is a quick video on how to do a basic connection check to try to determine the issue and possibly resolve it yourself without having to call your internet service provider. Hold on until the end, I have some bonuses for you. This is based on Windows 10, but Mac, Linux, iOS, and Android devices are similar. Let's get started. Check the network icon near the clock on the taskbar, typically on the bottom right. The icon and tooltip, when you hover your mouse over it, changes with the status of your connection. It can be a globe, a set of arcs going up to the left, or an icon of a screen with a mouse. You can always jump to the chapter in this video that matches what you see to better focus on the issues you have at the time. If YouTube hasn't enabled chapters yet, you can find the timestamps in the description. Am I connected to my local network? If you're using Wi-Fi and are connected to a network with a connection to the internet, the icon and tooltip will look like this. This means that your device is connected to a local network, and Windows itself can see the internet by making a connection to there. To get the tooltip, just put the mouse cursor over the icon and wait. It will pop up. This is called hovering. This is the time to check different programs and applications on the computer to see if some work and some don't. That can be a sign of various things. If some applications don't work, then jump ahead to the Connected with Internet but Doesn't Work section. Similarly, if you're using Ethernet and are connected with Windows and is able to connect to the internet, the icon and tooltip will look like this. If your specific application doesn't work, then jump ahead to the Connected with Internet but Doesn't Work section, just like Wi-Fi. Not connected to Wi-Fi, connections available. When not connected to Wi-Fi, you get the globe icon with this tooltip. Start with trying to connect the Wi-Fi again. If your network, also known as SSID, is in the list, try connecting. Perhaps the name or password changed. If it doesn't appear in the list and other devices are connected, perhaps you're in a Wi-Fi dead spot as far as the computer's concerned. Does a mobile device next to the computer still have a connection? And if so, how many bars? You may need a booster, extender, or access point to provide better Wi-Fi at that spot. If it appears to try connecting but won't, you can try forgetting and reconnecting the Wi-Fi network. If that still doesn't work, there may be a driver issue or some other setting that the two devices can't agree on. Did something recently change in your network? New gateway, new computer, new network adapter, software update? Often we suggest a power down and boot up of the device to reset all the hardware and software. Just doing a restart only completely resets the software, but only some of the hardware. I had a computer with both Ethernet and Wi-Fi, and both quit overnight. I tried bringing them up with no success. Once I unplugged and plugged in the Ethernet, it came up fine. I was then able to connect the Wi-Fi, which I couldn't do before that. Windows can be so fickle sometimes. If none of this resolves your issue, you could try an Ethernet connection in the meantime, but this likely requires taking the device to a computer repair shop to rectify. We know that the Wi-Fi adapter is enabled, can see networks, but won't connect. You could also try connecting to a hotspot from a phone or to another Wi-Fi network to see if it's just your network that's giving problems. If this works and your gateway is using Wi-Fi 6, or otherwise known as 802.11ax, then some network cards require special drivers that Windows won't automatically install yet to work with Wi-Fi 6. Intel comes to mind, but there are probably other vendors with similar issues. I have had to go to manufacturers' sites after specific searches to find these special drivers. No connections available. This is a situation that probably doesn't originate on your computer. This shows up when the Wi-Fi adapter thinks it is working, but can't see any Wi-Fi networks. It can also show up if the Ethernet isn't seeing anything on the other end. If using Ethernet, check the cable and connections at both ends. Typically, there is 1 or 2 lights where the cable plugs in that shows a connection and that blinks to show traffic. It could be a bad cable, a bad port, or a bad device. If on Wi-Fi, ensure airplane mode is off and Wi-Fi is enabled. Click the icon to open that menu. If Wi-Fi is off, sometimes it is a button or switch on laptops, or sometimes it is a power setting that is powering down the Wi-Fi adapter if it won't turn on and stay on. Tip: if you want to save battery power and aren't using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, then use airplane mode to power them down. This can save quite a bit of power. Just don't forget to turn it back on again as needed. This also may end up being an issue you have to take to a computer technician if you can't get it turned on or connected using these tips. No internet access. This would be the time to start checking the device connecting you to the internet, often called a modem, gateway, or router. This is especially true if you're using a separate gateway, modem, and router, as the router can be working and the modem gateway isn't. This is common with gamers. Check other devices to see if they are connected and working to determine if the problem is this device or some other issue. It is possible that this device is blocked with parental settings or time limitations, paused, etc. Many networking devices have that capability. Check also that a proxy hasn't been set that isn't actually there and working. How to do that would be in a later, more advanced video. If the problem is with multiple devices, then check the gateway as mentioned above. Rebooting often fixes the problem. Checking the internet device. Check for lights. If there aren't any, it probably doesn't have power, but it might be a bad device. If it uses one of those power transformers at the wall, it may have gone bad or has a bad connection. Check and reseat the connections to be sure, no matter what type of device it is. Check the wires. Various pets and rodents have been known to chew the wires. Ensure there is power at the outlet. Is anything else plugged in there working? I've seen breakers or fuses open. Many power bars have a switch and even a breaker on them. My cats have a bad habit of stepping on the power bar switches. If there are lights on, do they appear normal? Each manufacturer has different lights for different things. Some are obviously marked, some aren't. So you might have to do some digging to find out what they mean or make notes before there are problems. Just like with your computer, phone, or tablet, sometimes restarting the device helps. I've even started seeing this with smart TVs. Usually a power cycle is recommended to completely reset the chips inside as mentioned before. Typically 30 seconds without power will do the trick, but sometimes longer is recommended. Knowing the typical startup sequence of lights when everything is working properly is also of great help here. Connected with internet but doesn't work. If there are problems of this nature, it may be a site down, firewall, or software configuration issue for those apps. But Windows itself can verify an outside connection. Test other applications and sites to see if they are working. Can you bring up a different web page? If so, then it is a problem typically outside you or your ISP's control. Can you bring up a different web page? If so, then it is a problem typically outside your or your ISP's control, though check the next question. Do you get an error like a DNS error from the browser? DNS stands for Domain Name System. It is like an address book where you provide a name like www.google.ca and your device connects to the configured DNS server to get an IP address back, since that is what is used to connect to other devices. If you get a DNS error, then either the DNS server is not responding or it can't get an answer for that address. This may be out of your control, though advanced users can try manually setting other DNS servers to see if that helps. Also check the deeper diving section below. A rare but plausible issue is when there is a proxy configured. This can happen when you have a work computer that is brought home, or there is some other reason to use a proxy. A proxy is a device on the network that acts as an intermediary, so all requests for internet go to the proxy, which gets an answer and returns it. They were really popular when internet sites were more static and slow connections, so a local proxy could serve pages much faster. However, as sites became more dynamic and speeds increased, they've become less they've become much less useful for that purpose. Now they show up more as filtering or logging devices. I've also seen where this issue happened because the main network connection being used did not have IPv4 configured or enabled. This can also happen if the network device giving your computer an IP4 address isn't doing so. See the deeper diving section, which is next. Deeper diving. There are more tools that can be used to do a deeper diagnosis if none of this has helped to solve the issue. I've already mentioned some of them, but here's a quick list. ipconfig. It's run from a command prompt. Search for CMD in the search box. This lets you see the settings for the network adapters, such as IP addresses, default gateways, DNS servers, and up or down status. It can also let you reset the IP stack, a software term for the pieces that make up the workings of IP networking, which is sometimes necessary when the things really get gummed up. This isn't hard, but it is more of an advanced step. NSLOOKUP. They also run from a command prompt with a site name after a space to check if your computer can get an address for that site. Ping. Again, run from the command prompt with a site name after a space to check if the site is reachable from your computer and how big latency is. As an explanation, latency is the time for your request to leave your computer, go to the host through the intervening networks, and return back. It is quite important for live things like video calls, games, and interactive sites. If DNS isn't working, then ping can take an IP address if you somehow already know that for the site. Some sites block pings, but they usually send a reply saying so. Some simply block or ignore the request. I typically ping localhost. That'd better work, or things are really having issues. Then I ping the gateway. Then I ping the DNS server. If all the others worked, that checks the path from your host to your local gateway and to an outside host, or maybe the DNS is still your gateway. Trace route, which is actually spelled TRACERT. It's also run from a command prompt with a site name after a space to check the path to the site given. This is essentially a ping with increasing timeouts to see the path taken and the latency along the way. This can be really helpful to show where a slowdown occurs. Sometimes it's outside of your ISP and there's pretty much nothing they can do about it. Look for future videos diving deeper into how to use these tools and interpret the results. If you have questions or comments, please leave them below, and I'll do my best to answer them, or perhaps they'll be covered in a future video. I hope you found this video helpful. Please click like, subscribe, and the bell icon to be notified when future videos get posted. Oh, I almost forgot. Check the description of this video for a link that you can click to get the script with pictures and also software I wrote to help you do a deeper dig for diagnostic information that could be helpful to you or whomever is helping you with your internet problem. Thank you very much. I'm sure you're wondering about that tool I keep mentioning. Here's a little quick rundown. So as it starts up, it's doing its checks. It starts out blue, and when it's done, it will turn either green or red. Now let's have a quick look at what the results come up as. Okay, so you can see it's got the check mark boxes. So first it checks with Windows to see if the network is up. Then it checks to see if it's a valid IP4 address or if it's an auto-config. I've discovered with testing that it doesn't even make it to here because it doesn't consider the network up unless it has a valid IP4 address. And then it checks to make sure that the IP address is in the same subnet as the gateway, because that can definitely cause major issues. And then also that the DNS matches the subnet, which is not necessary because you could be using an external DNS. It then checks to see if a proxy is enabled. If you have a proxy enabled, if it is not working or functioning properly or doesn't exist, then this will cause your internet to fail, even though it looks good. Then I ping the local host, which is the machine you're on, and that better, as I said, better work. Then I ping the gateway. That determines whether your machine's on and got an address, but can't talk to the gateway. And then I ping the DNS server, which if it's on your network is probably the gateway. And if it's outside, then that tests two things. It tests internet connectivity by IP address and of course your local network work. And then finally it does an internet up check, which checks for Google, www.google.ca through a web request. So that really checks functionality. This right pane is the summary of the results, so it'll show up that there's network connection is up for that first check. Then it shows all the interfaces it found. It checks which ones are down and which ones are up. And for the up ones, it gives you the index, which for us really means nothing. The bytes sent and received, so you can get an idea of which is the fastest, and the speed it's reporting. In this case, you can see it's essentially not working. This is the one that's working. We then go on to list off the fastest internet interface found that's up and configured. We spit out its configuration, which is what you would get from ipconfig. Then we go through, like I say, these tests here. Nothing shows up for proxy unless there's some issue with the proxy or the proxy's turned on, in which case it'll give you the proxy information. So ping to localhost. Again, it gives you the latency on the local host, which should always be 0. The gateway, there's a little bit of latency. The DNS server, oddly, there's no latency, even though it's the same machine. But that may be because it was just done. So it already has the information in the cache. And then here's your check for the internet. And that tells you that it being up says that it works. And then it does a different latency test for over 50 pings instead of 1 to get an average over 50, which is what we usually do to see if it is within reason. And this one's giving you 53 milliseconds. I'm going to turn the proxy on, and it's going to give an invalid address. So it's just not going to work. I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to say save. We'll go back to my program, and I'll launch it again from scratch so you can see it start up from scratch again. So it's in the blue, it's trying. Note proxies enabled. Note over here, you do have scroll bars, but I'm just going to expand. Note over here that it does mention that the proxy is on. I'm just trying to find where that is. There it is. Proxy being on may cause internet issues if it isn't working or filters traffic. And the proxy is set to this weird outside address. And notice my internet tests failed. So I can't get internet right now. So I'm going to turn it back off again. And when I do, for whatever reason, you don't have to save the settings. And we'll launch that one more time. There we go. That's the main functionality. Now for some of the other stuff, in here you can do a manual refresh, which you can also do by double clicking. See it refreshed. And it's doing its check. You can double click over here to refresh, and that forces it to check. You can copy everything in here to the clipboard if you want to put it into a report or something, or you can log it to file. Now the log to file is interesting because if you go in and set it on repeat, this text box over here starts to act up. Remember I said Microsoft and Windows has some little quirks, and that's one of them. So when it's on repetitive, or if you click this a whole bunch of times, when it reaches a certain limit of lines, it automatically logs to a text file with the name of the program and the current date and time. Now this increments in 5-second intervals when you use the up and down, but you could put in a manual number and it will repeat at that interval automatically and log to the file. And of course there's help about, and it just shows you the about information for the program.